Hello and welcome to the Pick and Roll NBA podcast. And yes, we're back. I know it's been a long time since the last episode, but I'm gonna try. A new goal of mine is as the season wraps up is to try to post a podcast at least every week, maybe more than once a week. Uh, we'll see, but definitely you're gonna be getting an episode every single week as the season comes to a close. And yeah, today's topic is the MVP race. Very fun topic to talk about. Very big topic. A lot of players that come to mind when you think of the MVP. Uh, Especially because the season has been so long and we've had so many different number one candidate for MVP. At the beginning of the year we had Steph Curry, and everyone thought he was the clear MVP, but he started to slow down, and he's really had those few months where he was really bad. Curry's really slowed down. Then we've had Embiid and Jokic, really probably the two front runners. But some players emerged as the second half of the season started. For example, John Morant and DeMar DeRozan. Devin Booker has put his name in the MVP talks recently. So has Jason Tatum. Durant has always been in talks all year. That injury that really derailed those MVP talks, though. But yeah, this is a very interesting race we've had this year with with injuries to superstar players, with superstar players like Steph Curry, as we mentioned just a second ago, going on their big runs and then kind of falling off. But yeah, we got a lot to talk about, and I'm going to give my top five candidates, and then maybe I'll give some honorable mentions at the end. One more thing before we get into it, I am getting over a slight cold, so if I may cough here and there while I'm talking, and my voice may not sound great, but that's just because I'm getting over a cold. Um, but yeah, let's get right into it. So I have five candidates here, and these, in my opinion, these five players are my top five candidates for MVP. Other players could definitely be in this conversation. It's not a top five and it's exclusive. There's definitely, you could swap out some of these players I have in the top five for other players. I think the top three that I have, there's three players in here that I think you can't not have in the top five. So we're gonna start with Devin Booker, who has been so good recently. I mean, just so you understand, in the last 10 games, he's averaging 30 and a half points, 7 assists, 4.5 rebounds. He's shooting 42% from three and 55% from the field, and getting over 1.5 steals a game. I mean, there's no Chris Paul. Chris Paul has recently just come back, I think, earlier this week. And the Suns have maintained their top record in the Western Conference. They're sitting at 60-14. They're on a 7-game win streak. They're going to finish the season as the best record in the NBA. Um, yeah, that's thanks a lot to just how well the team is coached by Monty Williams, and how the team is really just a well-built team overall. But I mean, if you look at the last 15 MVPs in the entire league, 10 of them have been the number one scorer on the best team in the league. That's exactly what Devin Booker is, the number one scorer on the best team in the league. You can't not have Devin Booker as an MVP candidate. It's just, it doesn't make sense not to. We could look at those those stats I just gave you were over the last 10 games. Over the entire season, he's averaging 26.3 points per game. That's ninth in the league. He's giving 5 rebounds a game, 5 assists, and he's top 20 in PER. But the big focus here is not necessarily the stats. His stats are very good, but they're not, compared to some of the other guys we're going to go over, are not as good stats as the other guys. But what Booker has is the capability to really put the team on his back and win games. And he showed that he can do that, because with Chris Paul being out for the past month, he's put the team on his back, even though he's been dealing with some minor injuries over the past month. Even when he's played through some of those minor injuries, he's been carrying this team. I mean, they've lost like three. I think they've lost 1 game or 2 games since Chris Paul got injured. That's insane to think about. How few games they've only lost 14 games all season. I mean, it's crazy. With they've played 74 games and they've only lost 14 times. Obviously, there's still a little bit of basketball left in the year, 8 games left, but they've secured the number one spot. They can't not be the number one spot. Obviously, there's some flaws to Devin Booker, and you could point out that, to start the season, Booker was pretty inconsistent and wasn't great to start the year. And on his first 20 games of the season, he was only averaging 22 points a game, shooting under 45% from the field, which is a very bad start. I got to be honest, but the way he's turned things around in the last month is just insane. And I think if he could really have a good chance to win MVP. Next player I want to talk about is a 22-year-old third-year player from Murray State, Ja Morant. I mean, the Grizzlies, they're right behind the Suns. They're the 2 seed in the West. They're 3.5 games ahead of the Warriors, who are the 3 seed. So they're probably gonna lock in that 2 seed, and they're gonna probably finish the season as the number 2 seed in the West, which is crazy to think about, as they were, I think, the number 9 seed in the West last year and made their way into the playoffs due to play-in. So they weren't even a top 8 seed last year, and they're gonna finish the season as this, with most likely with the second best record in the entire league. And that's obviously thanks to Ja Morant, averaging 27.5 points a game. That's 6th in the league, nearly 6 rebounds. For a point guard, that's a lot. 6.7 assists, that's 15th in the league, and he's 7th in PER. His shooting has been a little bit down in the last 10 games, shooting only 21% from 3 and 45% from the field, compared to his season averages of 34% from 3 and 50% from the field. But, this is just a little small slump. I don't think that can take it, that this slump that he's had in the last 10 games. I wouldn't even call it a slump because he's still scoring 26 points a game. But the shooting, in terms of percentages, it's definitely a slump. But I don't even think the slump takes him out of the MVP race, just because of what he's done all season long. I mean, we're talking about a player that, was rookie of the year in his first year. And then last year had probably a worse year than his rookie year. And you had a lot of people in the media saying that, this is the best version of Ja Morant we're ever going to see, right? He's always going to be averaging around 20 points a game with 7 assists, and he's always going to be a borderline all-star, just like Mike Conley. There was a lot of comparisons to like what Mike Conley was, A lot of people in the media were saying Ja Morant's just going to be just like Mike Conley in terms of the fact that he'll probably never make an all-star game. Maybe he'll make 1 or 2, but he's never going to be a real superstar. And man, did he prove everyone wrong. He's so entertaining to watch. There's seemingly no flaws in his game. He's improved on everything, all the criticism he's gotten last year. Last year, we had people saying, Ja Morant, he's good and all, but he can't shoot threes. What does he do? He improves his 3-point percentage, and now he's a good 3-point shooter, shooting 34% from 3. He's always been a good defender. He's always been a good shot creator. He's always been good at finding his open teammates and making plays. He's always been good at scoring at the rim. There is really no flaw to his game, which is what makes him such a good candidate for MVP. When you look at MVP guys that are MVP, basically you're saying is they're a top player in the league. You're not going to give the MVP to Chris Middleton, right? You're going to give it to a top guy in the league. And what makes you a top guy in the league is if you could do everything at an elite level. And Ja Morant can do everything at an elite level. We have a great game coming up soon with Memphis playing the Warriors. That'll be a great game. Ja Morant versus Steph Curry. I think Ja Morant will go off in this game. I have high expectations. I don't think Curry can guard Ja Morant for his life. I think Curry's an extremely overrated defender. So yeah, I think over the next about 8 games left in the season, Ja Morant is gonna try to end the season off strong and make a very strong case for MVP. I wouldn't be surprised if we end the year and we say Ja Morant is the clear MVP over the next 8 games. We know how Ja Morant could go on these stretches. He had this stretch a few weeks ago. He had like a little 2 to 3 week stretch where he was just insane. So I think we could see that again over the next 8 games. We could see another crazy stretch coming up. The reason I think that is because he's been in a minor slump. So I think he's going to come out of this slump and he's going to finish the season off strong. Now we're going to start to get into my top 3 candidates. First guy we're talking about is a lot of people's number 1 MVP candidate, Joel Embiid. Joel Embiid in the last 10 games is averaging 31.5 points a game, 12 rebounds, 2 blocks, 2 steals, and 3.5 assists,
shooting 44% from three and 48% from the field. Crazy. I mean, oh my God. If you're not shocked by the numbers I just spit out to you, then you're crazy, because those numbers I just spit out are insane. He's shooting 43% in the last 10 games from three. That's as a center that's not known as a good shooter. I mean, Embiid is the definition of dominant. You can't guard him one-on-one. Who are you gonna tell in the league to go guard that 7 foot, 280-pound monster of a man, Joel Embiid? Because he could score anywhere in the court. He could hit you with the three. He could hit you with the mid range. He could hit you with the fadeaway. He could hit you with just a dunk. He could just dunk right on you. And it's not like he could only play in the post, right? Obviously, that's where most of his points will come from, the post, because he's just so big and strong, and his footwork is so great in the post. If you give it to him at the top of the key, he could dribble right by you. He is a good ball handler for his size. I mean, really good ball handler for his size. On the season, he's averaging 29.8 points per game. That's second in the league. 11.3 rebounds. That's seventh. 4.5 assists. That's pretty damn good for a center. And he's third in PER. I mean, Joel Embiid can just fill up the stat sheets on any given night. He might be he's one of the best scorers in the league. You have guys like Kevin Durant and Steph Curry and LeBron in that conversation. But there's a very good argument for Joel Embiid being the best scorer in the entire league. And I mean, that's not the only case you have for Embiid for MVP, because the Sixers just took the number one spot in the Eastern Conference. I mean, they've been really, really good all year. Before they even got Harden, they were a top 5, top 4 seed in the East before they even got Harden. And now, since they've got Harden, they've just been slowly climbing the Eastern Conference, and now they're sitting as the number one spot in the East. And yeah, has Harden been good? Yeah, Harden's been really good. But who's carried this team throughout the entire season? Joel Embiid. I mean, if you didn't have Joel Embiid the entire season, before Harden, they were sitting at around the 5 seed. Without Embiid, they would be sitting around probably a 15th seed. Like, they could have been a top 3 worst team in the league without Embiid. And I'm serious when I say that. I mean, this guy literally does everything for them at any elite level. He's a defensive player of the year candidate, in my opinion. If there was an offensive player of the year award, there would be a no-brainer. I would give it to Joel Embiid. I mean, he could win Defensive Player of the Year, MVP. He could win both those awards this season, and I wouldn't be shocked. I mean, he does everything, and it's such a crazy good level, and he's so dominant. He's one of the most dominant players we've seen since prime LeBron James. I mean, this is a special center. I mean, in terms of dominant centers, he's the most dominant center since Shaquille O'Neal, and there's no doubt about that. There hasn't been a center as dominant as Joel Embiid since Shaquille O'Neal. If you have Joel Embiid as your number one to win MVP, that's a very, very, very good pick. Next player I'm going to talk about is Giannis Antetokounmpo. The Bucks are currently the 4th seed in the East, but they're only half a game behind the 1 seed. So they we know the Eastern Conference. It's been kind of crazy all year. The Bucks could finish below the 5 seed. They could finish to the 6 seed, the 7 seed, even if they just lose all their next games. But they're only half a game behind the 1 seed, and saying that the 4 seed is kind of, you're not really looking at the full picture, because they're only half a game behind the 1 seed. We take a look at Giannis's stats. A lot of these players that we've been going over in the last 10 games have been going off, and Giannis, again, is one of those players. 31.5 points in the last 10 games, 4.5 assists, 11.5 rebounds, shooting 60% from the field, 34% from 3. He's getting over 1.5 blocks a game, 1.5 blocks in the last 10 games, over a steal in the last 10 games, and under 2.5 turnovers. With how often the ball's in his hands, under 2.5 turnovers is pretty damn good. On the season, Giannis is averaging 29.7 points per game. That's third. He's only 0.1 behind Embiid, who is second. 11.6 rebounds. That's sixth. 6 assists as a big man. He's 23rd in the league in assists, and he's a power forward / center.
That's crazy. And his PR is second best in the league. We all know who's number one. We'll talk about him in a sec. His regular season stats are insane. I mean, Giannis, just like Embiid, is another guy that can fill the stat sheet on. But unlike Embiid, Giannis can also fill up the assist numbers to usually a much higher number than Embiid can. When you were talking about the MVP race, Giannis is not talked nearly as much as I think he should be. We're all kind of just like, oh yeah, Giannis the MVP candidate. Next topic, next player, right? We all know Giannis the MVP candidate, but no one really wants to talk about him because he's already in the last 3 years he's won 2 MVPs. If he wins it this year, it'd be his third in the last 4 years. In my opinion, Giannis probably was the MVP last year. He probably should have been. Before the playoffs, right? We're just talking about Giannis's regular season last year. He was probably the best player in the regular season, but he didn't win MVP because of voter fatigue. Obviously, no one wanted to give it to him 3 years in a row. But seriously, how is there, when you go into the media and we look at the MVP race on the media, it's all Embiid and Jokic. It's all Ja Morant. It's all Booker. We're seeing Booker talked about more than Giannis recently. It's insane. How is Giannis not talked about more for the MVP race? He's been known as a bad 3-point shooter, but this season he's shooting 30% from three. Is that great? No. It's only 4 percentage points lower than Ja Morant. It's not horrible. You still have to kind of respect his 3-point shot. He's a defensive player of the year candidate every year. We know that. He's averaging 1.5 blocks a game and a steal a game. He's a guy that you could give the ball to. He's 6'11", and he could take you ISO 1-on-1 from the top of the key. He's another very dominant player, just like Joel Embiid. I think he's clearly an MVP candidate. If people are shocked if he wins the MVP award, you don't know basketball, because there's a very good chance that Giannis wins the MVP award, and it would not be shocking at all. Next player I want to talk about is Nikola Jokic. He was the MVP last year. We all know how great he is. The media coverage on Jokic in the last 1 to 2 months has been crazy. Everywhere you go and you search up basketball, Jokic will appear. But I mean, we talk about what their head coach said in the beginning of the season, that he's the most disrespected MVP of all time. At the time of him saying that was a valid statement, because in the beginning of the season, when we had a guy like Steph Curry giving 40 points a night almost, it seemed like he couldn't be stopped. No one was talking about Jokic because everyone was so amazed by Steph Curry. Everyone was so amazed by DeMar DeRozan's Cinderella story about how, he went from the worst signing in the offseason, theoretically, to now MVP candidate. But when DeMar DeRozan started to slow down, when Steph Curry started to slow down, that's when we started to need a new MVP candidate type of player to talk about. So along comes Nikola Jokic. He's like, I've been here all season, averaging 26.3 points per game, which is 10th in the league, 13.5 rebounds, which is second in the league, 8 assists with the eighth, which is 8th in the league, and I'm number 1 in PER. I'm the MVP candidate. And now all the media is like, oh, shoot, yeah, you are. I mean, Jokic is the only player in the league. There's no other player besides Jokic that is top 10 in points, rebounds, and assists. Jokic is the only player in the entire league. We talk about any advanced stat. Pick any advanced stat. I would bet money that Jokic is number 1 in the entire league in that stat. He has the best plus minus in the league. He has the best win shares in the league. He is the most valuable player, because without him, the Denver Nuggets probably finished the season as in the entire league as the worst record in the entire league. I mean, we're talking about a guy that leads his team in every single statistical category, including steals and blocks. Literally every possible category, every possible stat, Jokic leads his team. And they're still the 6th seed in the West. I mean, what Jokic has to do every night, it's unmatched by any other player in the league, because there's no other player in the league. There's guys that have to carry a lot. I'm not saying that, guys like LeBron, guys like Embiid. In the first half of the season, Embiid had to carry that team on his back. LeBron's had to carry his team on his back. But I mean, even in the first half of the season with Embiid, before they had Harden, they still had Tobias Harris. They still had Tyrese Maxey. I'd take both of those players over Aaron Gordon any day of the week with my that's a no-brainer. I mean, Jokic has carried his team to the 6th seed in the West. It would be crazy, 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 crazy to not have him as the MVP right now. I think he has the best argument in the entire league for MVP. If your argument against Jokic is that he's the 6th seed in the West, you don't know what you're talking about. Because as I've just said, if you look at the rest of his team, it's just he has no help. There's just the help there with Jokic. It's not existent. Does Embiid have a good case? Yes. Does Giannis have a really good case? Yes. Both of them have really, really good cases. But do they have a better case than Jokic? In my opinion, they don't. I mean, you could go look at all these numbers that I'm looking at right now. I think you would agree with me that Jokic is the most valuable player in the league. And I mean, if you disagree with me and you think that Embiid is the most valuable player, or you think that Giannis is the MVP, or you think Ja Moran is, or Devin Booker, or anybody else but Jokic, you're entitled to your opinion. But all I'm gonna say is the stats disagree with you. It's not my opinion versus your opinion. It's the stats versus your opinion. All the stats back up Jokic for the MVP. I think it's crazy not to say he's the best player in the league. I think it's crazy not to say he's the MVP of the league. But yeah, I mean he's a great player. And now I want to go over some honorable mention players. Right, I've only listed 5 players. As I said in the beginning, there's many players that I think can be in this top 5 race as well. So yeah, let me just name a few players. I'll give you some stats. I'll give you the reasons why I don't think they're top 5. This will be much quicker than the rest of this episode has been. Guys in my honorable mention category, I have Jason Tatum, Steph Curry, LeBron James, and Luka Doncic, and DeMar DeRozan. So those 5 players have been really good this year. Guys like DeMar and Curry were definitely in the top 5 in the beginning of the year. They both kind of fell off a bit. Steph Curry had a huge slump. His shooting percentages are really bad this season. He shoots like 41% from the field. That's why he's not an MVP candidate. He's not an efficient scorer. DeMar DeRozan, the Bulls have just not been playing well. He kind of just went on an overall just kind of slump since that hot start he had in the beginning of the year. Is he still a top 10 player in the league? Yes, but he's just not a top 5 MVP candidate. Guy like Jason Tatum, the only reason I don't have him in the top 5 is because of that horrific start to the season he had. We're talking about the MVP of the entire regular season, not of the last 25 games of the year, of the entire year. And I mean, he was so bad in the beginning of the year. He was so bad. I thought Jaylen Brown was the best player in that team in the first half of the year, and Jaylen Brown probably was the best player on that team in the first half of the year. I mean, Tatum's shot selection in the first half of the year was atrocious. That's definitely something he still needs to improve on. But yeah, that's horrible start that he had to the year in the beginning of the year is the reason I don't think he's a top 5 MVP candidate. With LeBron, I mean, he's leading the league in scoring. He's obviously still a top 10 player in the league, arguably still a top 5 player in the league. I don't know. That's a discussion for a different day. But the reason I don't think LeBron's top 5 in MVP is for the simple fact that they're the 9th seed. And yes, you could blame that on the team all you would like. But at the end of the day, we have players with worse teams as higher seeds. For example, Nikola Jokic and the Nuggets. His supporting cast is worse than the Lakers supporting cast. You can't convince me otherwise. But yet he's still 3 seeds higher than LeBron and the Lakers. So I think, the fact that the Lakers have a chance at they have a chance at missing the in general. It's not a good look for LeBron and his MVP case. You can't be that low in the standings and have a top 5 MVP case. Last honorable mention is Luka Doncic. I think he's my number 1 honorable mention. I think if I had to swap anybody out and swap somebody in, I would swap Luka Doncic into the top 5 because his stats, we know he's going to fill the stat sheet. The Mavericks are the 5 seed in the West. They had a pretty meh start. They were sitting around the 7 seed for practically the whole year, around that 7 to 8 seed spot.
But since trading Porzingis, what looked like a horrible trade, and I thought that was a horrible trade for the Mavericks, they've been really good and they've been playing much better. And now they're tied for the four spot. I mean, if they really play really well, they could finish. There's a chance they finish as the 3 seed in the Western Conference. The only reason I wouldn't have him in the top 5 is the fact that like a guy like Jason Tatum, just like Tatum, he had a great start, but it was a little bit underwhelming. It was definitely an underwhelming start for Luka Doncic. His percentages weren't great. So I think we're talking about the regular season MVP, not the last 25 games of the season. We're talking about the entire season as a whole. So I think when we look at Luka in the last 25 games, he's definitely a top 5 MVP candidate. But if we talk about the entire season, he's not a top 5 MVP candidate, but he's very, very close. Him and Booker for me are practically tied. I just give the slight edge to Booker. So those are my MVP candidates. I think Jokic is the MVP. I'd love to hear if you can give me a good reason why Jokic isn't the MVP. I'm all ears. I just don't think you can give me a good reason. I don't think there is a good reason why Jokic isn't the MVP. But thank you so much for listening, and hopefully you're here for our next episode.